Hey friends, before we jump into today's conversation, I just want to let you know that this is part one of a two-part series. This discussion is deep, it's real, it's honest, because corn destroys more than you think. Today we are talking about what so many people struggle with in silence, what my guest calls the silent addiction. And because there is so much to unpack, you're going to want to make sure that you come back next week for part two. Let's get it in, y'all. If you are a married believer trying to navigate this intimacy thing without shame, go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you are in the right place.
Going on 12 years now, is when I actually had the wake up call that said, I have an addiction. Shame's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? I'm not doing that anymore. It was one of those things that never crossed my mind that I would need counseling or that I had an addiction. It wasn't because I was in such denial. It was that I never could equate the fact that I had an addiction. 3 years after I stopped, I became aware that, wow, that's what I had
Wow.
was an addiction. And it took me a long time to settle that in my heart.
Welcome to the space where we tell our truth. Testimony, healing, breaking shame loose. Learning our bodies and walking by faith. Intimacy God's way, right here is the place. Sex-Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6. We believe in the power of the story. Not just pain, but redemption and glory. Faith in the rhythm, hearts in the mix. Trust in educators. Mondays at 6, we're overcoming by the word of these testimonies. People getting free when we speak what's holy. Healing in our hearts, shame starts to split. Every story told, another chain gets stripped. Learning our bodies, learning His way. Intimacy and faith, walking day by day. This is where we heal, where the truth sticks. Sex-Ed for Saints, Mondays at 6.
I'm so excited to finally share this book with you. Hey God, Can I is available now. Find the link in my bio to get your copy.
So thank you for everyone who coming on to the podcast right now. I'm so excited that we're here because today's episode is going to be fantabulous. Listen, if you need freedom from whatever addiction that you have, you are going to find that today. Specifically, if you have struggles with pornography or anything like that, Maurice is your go-to person. And I am excited to have you on the show. Hi, Reese. How are you
Hey,
doing?
it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to have you. You know, when I was going over your story and reviewing it, I was like, man, this is such a powerful story of redemption and all the things. And I'm so excited to get into the conversation today. But before we get into it, I like to answer questions from my audience. And I got a very interesting one this week. And I'm going to read that question because this is one that we can touch bases on. We can talk about it for a moment and, you know, take it from there.
Mhm.
And so let me see if I can pull it up. And if you wanted to leave a question, if you go to the Marriage Lab LLC on my website, on my Instagram, there is a link there where you can ask anonymous questions. You'll click on that link, ask your question. I won't know who asked it. It is anonymous. So absolutely go there and ask your question, and you'll have an opportunity for us to answer it on the pod. And so this question says, my spouse and I are going through a very difficult season. I walked in on him watching pornography and it broke my heart. I knew something was off, but I never expected this. I do not trust him anymore. I have lost my desire for him and I feel betrayed. And I honestly don't know what to do. I don't know if our marriage can recover from this. What am I supposed to do now? Is this something that can even be fixed? Wow.
That is a hard question.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
a difficult one. It's a difficult one, but it's a common one for people who struggle with addiction because it's something that's hidden first. And you know,
Mhm.
God, He reveals everything that happens in the darkness. Eventually, it's going to come to light. And
That's
so,
right.
if she had walked in on him using it, it's probably something that he has been struggling with for a while. So, Reese, you want to comment on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. You are right, that it has been with him probably his whole life, and
Mhm.
I don't know how old they are, but, this is how many men are found out, is their wife doesn't feel right about something, she's picking up something, and then she goes and she opens the door, and at that moment, we call it the D-Day, the discovery day,
Mm.
and so, the man point blank doesn't have much to say. Typically, what the man will say is, No, I don't have a problem with this. It was just something I did, right now. I knew I shouldn't have, but I just felt like, I was tired, I was stressed, I couldn't sleep. They kind of bring up all of these excuses as to why they
Mhm.
did it so that they don't lose the marriage. And a lot of times it'll happen over the course of maybe a year or 2 or 3. I thought you said you were done with that. Well,
Yeah.
I am, but it was just this one time, and the woman wants to believe him so bad because she didn't get married to get divorced, right? And
Yeah.
so, can marriages recover after this? Yes, I've seen a number of marriages recover after this. The one thing that she needs to know is that he probably brought that into the marriage. So, as far as it being based upon her, it's not her fault. And it's probably not even about her that he does that. This has been a very strong coping mechanism for him for a long time. And depending on what his backstory is, how he grew up, what his family life was like, what his early teen years were like, and so on before he met his wife, that's something that can be uncovered, especially through counseling. And when we find that there might be some emotional pain that's a part of their past. And one of the things that I like to do as far as the counseling that I do is I want to get all of these men to a place where they can really discover the pain of the past and sit in it for a while because God wanted to heal that in you, but you didn't allow him to do that because you started running from it. Um, but you started running from it, and because of that, you just continue to rack up more coping mechanism, more coping mechanism, more coping mechanism. And so you steal away. Well, that doesn't change just because you find this woman that you think is beautiful and that you think you can commit to. It doesn't stop at the point of marriage. It doesn't stop when the rings go on. It usually takes a bit of a hiatus after you get married, but after
Mm.
things start getting back to kind of a normal routine in your life, that stuff flies back out in front and into your head again. And your body is always telling you, okay, if you get upset, you know what to do. If you get upset, you know what to do. And the brain is always trying to regulate you out of stressful or dangerous places, whether it could be physical danger or emotional danger. And so that has become something that this gentleman has probably used, and his brain has pulled him back to time and time again because there's been some form of danger, some form of emotional danger, could have even been some form of physical danger. But if he gets triggered, he goes back into that coping mechanism. And now she is going to have a real heavy problem because this knight in shining armor just fell off his horse and she doesn't know what to do. Now she's going to start going into this thing of like comparing herself to all the porn stars that he's watching on there. And one thing that I found out in my work that I've done over the years is that women already have that sense of need to be valued, to be chosen, to be accepted by the man, so to speak, the male that they find themselves drawn together. Whenever a man asks a woman to marry her, it's almost like the sense of, phew, like I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do this anymore. I can just be with the one I love, and that's the way it should be. But we shouldn't always have to compare ourselves. But a lot of times, men and women do that in their own separate ways. They compare themselves to pop culture, to music. Is this the way I'm supposed to be? Is this the way I'm supposed to look? And so we always go through that stuff, especially in our formative and teen years. And then we think, oh, I'm supposed to look this way, I will get a man, or I'm supposed to do this, I'll get a woman. And all of that stuff is just so surface and so flesh oriented that we hardly have a chance to get past that into the spiritual. And so they can recover, but he has to be willing to do the hard work of allowing the Father to heal him with his love of all those things in his past
Yeah.
that brought him some emotional pain or discomfort. And she can heal as well by getting, really good insight from Christian counselors who deal with betrayal trauma. And the one thing that we need both people to remember is that this, if you want to put it in kind of an example, this is like you're riding in a car going down the street, and your husband ran a red light. And because he ran a red light, this big tractor trailer came in on the passenger side, right? And everything now is all over the place. Everything's out in the open. You've got a very injured wife. You have a very injured man. If the woman says, this is your problem, you got to fix it or else I'm leaving, and does nothing for herself at that moment, she's going to die on the road. And so if she refuses help and all that kind of stuff, then she's going to die, and she's going to emotionally die, or even it could affect her spirit. And so we don't want that to happen to them. We want both of them to realize, okay, we've come to this major crossroads in our marriage. We need to do the hard work to heal. And the man stays in his lane, the woman stays in his lane, and both say, God is in charge of this marriage, but both of us need to do what it takes to heal ourselves as individuals. And then if we're doing that and we're actually implementing what we're learning, then the marriage can be whole again. It's not going to be the same marriage, though, because that marriage is gone. And that's some of the regret and some of the loss that wives feel, and some of the despair that they go through, right? And then they have to go through all that processes of losing something, and then getting to a place where you really don't want to go through recovery. In fact, I don't really use the word recovery myself, because you look back in so many people's lives and you ask them, well, what do you really want to recover from that? Right? Like, this is what got you there. Let's move on to the newness of life that God promises us. And he can promise that to us in our marriage, and he can promise that to us as individuals. So that's the long and short of my answer around that, because I deal with a lot of couples.
Yeah. And that's so good. That is so good. I don't really have anything to really add to that. Because you broke it down so well, especially with the driving down the road analogy and the semi running into them. That is a very good way to put that into perspective, so you can understand what that truly, truly does. The only thing is Proverbs 28 and 13. It says that whoever conceals their sins do not prosper. And so, but the one who confesses and renounces them find mercy. And so this right here lets you know that there is restoration as long as you are open about what it is that you're going through, and communicating that with your spouse. You both have to be in communication, because it's going to be a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Like the analogy that he gave, you have to go through a process to get your healing, especially if you have been injured, right? And so I absolutely love what you said. So I don't really have anything to add to that. So I'm excited to get into this episode, because listen, you gave us so much and we ain't even got into it yet.
Right. No, that's great. I'm glad, and hopefully that helps the person that asked. So
it absolutely will, or someone else who's struggling with it. So I hope that they watch this. But before we do get into the episode, tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sure. Born and raised outside Detroit, Michigan in the 60s, grew up in the 70s there. And that is when I started to encounter a lot of bullying in my life. I wasn't really close with my mom and dad because I was a latecomer to the family. And so we really didn't connect on a lot of topics or anything like that. My dad worked for the Southern Baptist Convention, and he was a church planter. My mom was in retail sales, but my mom and dad were gone quite a bit as I was growing up. And so the bullies that bullied me at school were the same bullies that lived on my block. And so I could never get away from it. And oftentimes, even as a young child in elementary school, I was left at home alone. My sister, who was 13 years older than me, lived across town. And if there was a need or anything like that, I could call them and they would be there, pretty quick. But most of the time I was home alone. Dad had meetings. Mom was working late retail hours. And so I grew up kind of living in fear, or learning how to fear is more appropriate. Also, when I was in elementary school, when we'd go out for recess and we would play team sports for recess instead of it being a free-for-all, they would go through and pick people for the teams, like kickball or basketball or something. And I was always the one that was the process of elimination person. I was never picked to be on the team. Everybody else was picked. In fact, they picked a kid who had cerebral palsy and walked with crutches before they would pick me.
Wow.
And I would think back to those days as I grew up, and I'm why, why? I'm not a real sports oriented person, right? So gravitating toward that stuff was never my strong point, but I was overweight when I was in high school. And so I was picked on a lot back then, especially in the 70s. Nobody did anything about it. And so, whenever we would go out, then whatever team I landed on, because I was the last person, I would always hear from them, "Oh, great, now we're going to lose." Right.
Wow.
And so I had this perfect storm that set up a narrative for me. I was bullied in school. I wasn't real close to my mom and dad. I was basically an only child growing up at home because my sister, being older than I was married and out of the house by the time I was 6. And then I felt just like devalued at school, right? Like, oh, great, now we're going to lose the game. And I heard that all the time. It wasn't just one or two times. Everybody was upset that I ended up on their team. And so I tried so hard to play well, in those games at recess. I wanted to show them that I was worth something, And so when I'd come up and try and kick the ball, I didn't try to be strategic about it. I wanted to go into the next state. That's how hard I would kick the ball. So growing up in that, it started to give me this narrative, because that went on for probably about 6 or 7 years straight. And so just getting beat down, walking home from school, getting ambushed and getting beat down, always having to find secret ways to make myself, get back home, and jumping fences, behind the houses behind me, and all this kind of stuff that I had to hide so much for fear that I was going to get beat up or teased or taunted or messed with. When I moved from Detroit to central Pennsylvania, where I lived for about 40 years of my life, all of that stuff stopped. But unbeknownst to me, all of the damage had really been done in my heart from those formative years. And so a friend of mine from school, and the one thing I want to say about finding the pornography was, when I was still in Michigan, there was this known dumpster behind a convenience store where they would drop off all these old magazines, old Playboy and Penthouse magazines. And knowing that and learning that through my friend group, I would go out and visit that dumpster and go get the magazines for myself. First time I ever saw a naked woman in that capacity was from that dumpster, and it completely hijacked my brain.
Wow.
That's what we say in the industry. Porn can hijack your brain. Well, for me, it did.
Mm-hmm.
It threw me out of the car and hopped behind the driver's seat,
Mm-hmm.
and took over. And
how old were you during that time?
I was about 11 or 12
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And a couple years later is when I actually moved to Pennsylvania. And not too long after that, a friend of mine, as the mediums went, from magazine, then onto television, then onto video, and that type of stuff. The porn industry is going to keep up with that type of activity. So a friend of mine from school, when I was about, 17, 18, before we graduated, he brought over some VHSs that his dad had stashed away in his closet. Back in the 70s, the dads had Playboy magazines stashed away in the closet. And then we got to the 80s, they had videos stashed away. And so that I began to obviously then see more like movies, right? More activity. And he would bring over different videos from time to time, and I'd watch them, and, and I'd give them back to him, and got any more? And that is when it really started to reinforce the addiction in my life,
Mm-hmm.
because of all my pain, all my damage that was going on inside my soul. That was the best way that I could feel to cope with all of that stuff. Even though I was making friends, and even though I was having girlfriends,
Mm-hmm.
And all that kind of stuff, I still felt like a loser. I would put myself down so often, even if I did something stupid, like drop a pencil on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would tell myself, you are such a loser. You can't do anything right. And then I would use a few expletives along the way as well.
Yeah.
And I just kept, why? Why am I continuing to live this way? And I at that age, being a teenager and moving into my 20s, why am I so hard on myself? I just never could understand it. I knew my mom and dad loved me, but we didn't really just have any kind of emotional engagement with each other, right? It was just functional parenting. And I was a functional son, and I was supposed to do this, and they did this, and then I do this, and they did this. But there was never any heart to heart. There was never a sense of like, I really love you. I want to teach you about your emotions. I want you to have a platform to express your emotions whenever you need to. It was just kind of like, oh, you're feeling that way. Oh, well, it'll make a man out of you. Or
Yeah.
it's their problem. It's not your problem. Well, hey, mom, dad, it is my problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the one that's getting beat up, and I'm the one that's coming home crying. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, long and short of it is I ended up going into the military for a few years, where it incredibly reinforced my sex addiction and porn addiction, because I was stationed over in Germany. And overseas at that time, you could find an X-rated cinema anywhere on any corner. I say it was like Southern Baptist Church in the South, right? You can find them on any corner. That's
Yeah.
the way it was in Germany with X-rated theaters. And so that really reinforced a lot of my appetite for sexual things.
Hmm.
And then, fast forward, I came back, thought I had my life somewhat together, except for that one area, and became a worship leader at a church. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'll be at a church. All my problems will go away. I'll be surrounded by people who can help me. And we can grow together. We can have good relationship with each other.
Hmm.
This is what I've really been dying for my whole life, because I feel like an outsider, and never really got to really do that or build those relationships with the leadership in the church, because it was
Yeah.
always like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do
Yeah.
this. This isn't what I thought it was going to be like, and so I just kept living out my own sexual fantasy life, and then ended up getting married while I was still a worship leader at that church. And we were together for about 6 years, five
Hmm.
5 years actually, and then we had our child. I did have a child out of wedlock shortly after I got out of the military. He's 36, going on 37 at the time of this recording. And but at the time in 2000, we had a daughter. The next thing I know is 6 months after my daughter is born, whom I loved with all my heart and soul and mind and strength, even more than God, even more than my wife. Something happened to me where I finally had this person I could give all of this pent up love to,
Hmm.
because I hated myself. But oh my gosh, I didn't even feel this way about my wife. I didn't feel this way about God. I didn't feel this way about my ministry. But when my daughter came in, I was like, oh, and this floodgate just opened, and I loved her probably too much. I
Yeah.
say that about myself now that she's in her 20s, but something happened there where everything I had going out to anybody else just went from me to her. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why would I leave her? Why would I leave her? But about 6 months later, I found myself in the throes of an affair.
Oh, wow. See, listen, we
Yeah.
got to unpack this because it's so much.
Yeah, please jump in anytime.
It's so much. It's so much. Listen,
Yeah.
from the time you were being bullied, this is the enemy he's starting real
Correct.
early with you. And then going from, the parents that you have, not that they don't love you, but they're not able to have these conversations with you for whatever reason. And what I find is that there are parents who don't feel comfortable communicating with their kids because it makes them uncomfortable to have the conversations. They don't have the language for it. They don't know how to deal with emotions and things like that. But in the background, you're over here pretty much crying out for help because you're going through these things, and leaving was kind of like a way out. However, the seeds had already been planted. And so when did you realize that you had the addiction? Like, when did you realize, okay, I'm finding these magazines at 11, I'm carrying it here, I'm carrying it there, because sometimes people, they might call it just entertainment at that moment, right? When did you realize
freedom of
yeah,
speech is
right.
the other one
When
they
did
like.
you exactly. So like, when did you realize, no, this is a problem?
Well, in 2011, I had left the church because of the affair. I had ended up getting divorced because of the affair, because I everything became so surreal to me. Nothing made sense to me anymore. But this one person that I'd had the affair with was able to listen to me, and she got me. My ex-wife now, the story of redemption is amazing. That's later, but my ex-wife then had her sights set on, one, marrying a worship leader, and two, having an international worship ministry. That was her heart for so long. She went to Bible school and she's like, this is what I want. I want to be a worshiper that goes around and leads throngs of people into worship. And I didn't know if that was my destiny or not. I was like, hey, if God wants that, then I'll definitely do it. But when I had the affair and all that stuff came to call, like the Pied Piper came to call on my life at that time, nothing made sense. Complete surreality. I just couldn't make head or tails of anything. And so we ended up getting divorced. I ended up marrying the woman with whom I had the affair with about a year after I actually signed the papers. It took about another 3 years for the divorce to go through. But after I signed the papers, about a year later, I ended up getting married. That was around 2005 when I got married. It would take me 6 more years to actually have an encounter with Christ strong enough for me to stop what I was doing. So
Wow.
I lost I say I lost, but I forfeited. I forfeited my family. I forfeited my ministry. You would think that after something that deep that I would have hit rock bottom, but I didn't hit rock bottom. In fact, what I tell people when I share with them is I say, I hit a really large ledge about 2 inches from the bottom. It got my attention, but it didn't do anything to stop my behavior. And so in 2011, 6 years after I got married to the person with whom I had the affair, I had an encounter with God that was so incredible with me. And that I stopped cold turkey because I was scared. And it was kind of the fear of God came into my life for the first time that I could ever really remember. And I literally heard these words spoken to me. I really have an incredible life planned out for you, but this can't come any further. And that's what I felt. And it felt like a stern father speaking to me in love, but still being very stern about it.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, man, if I go around the mountain one more time, will I have the opportunity for this again? I don't know. I don't know what my future looks like if I deny him at this time. And so it straightened me up. I mean, it totally straightened me up. And so that was 2011. In answer to your question would be that in 2014, 3 years after that, I was starting to delve into all of this information that I could find about porn addiction, sex addiction, the porn industry, et cetera, trafficking, all this kind of stuff I was getting into and going to these conferences. And about 3 years after I let it go, I sat back and I went, wow, I had an addiction.
Wow.
It didn't because when you're in Christianity, right? It's always this sense of I have a struggle. You know, it's just a struggle. That's really what it is. And I'll be okay. I'll get through this. It's fine. But what we realize is that we can't fight an addiction with the same tools we fight a struggle with, right? A struggle to me would be a guy coming into church with a tambourine and sitting on the front pew when I was up there playing music, and he would be so off beat and off rhythm.
Yeah.
That's a struggle. Okay. I mean, that for me, that's a struggle. But an addiction, that's a bigger word, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what you have to fight in the addiction is you have to open up yourself from days gone by and realize that God wants to meet that hurt. He originally wanted to meet it when you got hurt, but you didn't give him the opportunity. You shoved it down. You followed your coping mechanism. You listened to your brain, and you went on with your behavior. And then you felt better after it. And you hated yourself even more because you were doing something that was sinful. You knew it was sinful.
Yeah.
You knew it wasn't godly. But at the same time, and I've been to places where you have just been so overwhelmed with the fact, and you know God's sitting right next to you, but at the same time, you're like, I need this. I need this. I can't stop myself. I need this. And your brain is tugging on you, going, you're in some kind of danger, and you give in. And God was sitting right there. All you had to do was turn to him for the healing that you needed. But for some reason, you felt ashamed, and shame's a huge part of this, right? And
Yeah.
you felt ashamed of yourself. You felt shame in general, and you pushed God away, and you went and did the thing that you did. So in about going on 12 years now, is when I actually had the wake up call that said, I have an addiction. But what I didn't know was that there were counseling people out there who were well versed in this. I didn't know there was organizations out there that could really help me do this. And even when I went to these conferences and was learning and getting all this download from this information, I still didn't even think about what it meant for me to do um, counseling or therapy or something like that, because I thought, well, I quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the big deal? I'm not doing that anymore.
Mhm.
You know, I really don't. I don't know. But it was one of those things that never crossed my mind that I would need counseling or that I had an addiction. It wasn't because I was in such denial. It was that I never could equate the fact that I had an addiction. You know,
Yeah.
I just call it a struggle. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the long and short of that. After I had stopped, 3 years after I had stopped, it became aware. I became aware that wow, that's what I had
Wow.
was an addiction, and it took me a long time to settle that in my heart.
Wow. So all this time you're just thinking this is a struggle, this is entertainment, but it's a struggle. And I want to take it back a little bit because you
Sure.
said that you became the pastor of the youth, the worship leader of the church, the worship
Correct.
pastor,
Yeah.
right? And so you're going there with this position. So what was your relationship with faith like at that particular time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was up there leading worship, I mean, and it was kind of a church that was really open to the prophetic. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would hear things from the Lord when I was leading worship, and I would see things from the Lord when I was leading worship, and I would take the time to just speak it out over the congregation, and whatever God is trying to use this moment for in time, let's do it, right? And they gave me the freedom to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had this wonderful side over here of my relationship with God. But it only came out when I led worship.
Mm.
Going home and reading scripture was more about getting a lot of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And kind of what I turned to in my life as another coping mechanism was making sure I had enough knowledge
Mm-hmm.
about the Bible, about music, and all this kind of stuff, so that I always had a one up on somebody, right? So that's how I read scripture. But the only time I really felt God close was when I would lead worship, and I'd go, why can't I have this all the time? And then I'd get home and just go about my day and do my thing and get upset about something, end up sometimes being bored, whatever, and then going into pornography and
Yeah.
acting out, and it would just follow me all the time. I'd have these wonderful experiences in church leading worship, and then I would go home and it would be completely different. It was just night
Yeah.
and day. And to be quite honest, that's what I saw of my dad. And I don't mean to throw him under the bus. He was a great man of God, and I'm thankful for the foundation that he gave me. But my dad when he was on and he was singing, or he was leading a revival or a conference or a crusade or whatever it was he was doing, he was my idol. I mean, this guy was incredible, but the man I saw at home was non-existent, and it was just functionality in the relationship that we had. And so I started seeing my dad in me in that particular thing, and everything I had to do, even as a young child, I tried to do to please him. And so getting into ministry was something that I did to please him. So the
Yeah.
whole auspice of why I sat in that seat for 8 years was mostly because I wanted to feel valuable. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel accepted. All those things that 20 years earlier I didn't feel, right? And I've never been able to feel. And then you finally get to the place where you can't feel at all anymore.
Yeah.
You have these great moments, but
Mhm.
the rest of your life is nothing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was my relationship with faith and my relationship with God at that time. It was
Yeah.
1% and then 99% without.
Mm. You're speaking to so many people right now, especially as it relates to, musicians. I used to be a musician on the psalmist side, and I would hear people sing all the time, and the musicians, they would struggle with.
Hey, friends, quick pause in this lesson because I need to put you onto something that has been blessing so many households. This episode has been sponsored by Covenant Eyes, the accountability app that helps you protect your eyes, your mind, and your marriage. If you're serious about keeping your digital life pure, guarded, and God honoring, Covenant Eyes is a game changer. It helps you to stay accountable online and creates a safe space for your heart and your home. And listen, because you are a part of the Marriage Lab, you get 30 days free when you use my code Marriage Lab. So go ahead, take that step, cover your devices, and cover your covenant.
Addictions,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
would feel them. I would hear stories about them just dropping out, dropping out, dropping out. When you find out why, it's because of something that they had, something that they were struggling with, something
Right.
that, caused them something. And
Yeah.
so I definitely understand that. And so I want to talk a little bit about, that transition, because you said you went to church and you used to pour out, but then you landed somewhere into someone that opened up themselves to be able to hear you. How
Mhm.
was that process?
Yeah. I was actually well, I was leading worship at the church, and I knew this girl. I guess you'd call it girl back then, or young woman, back years earlier, because I had been in Christian rock bands around the central Pennsylvania area, writing a lot of original music, that type of stuff. She was also a singer songwriter in her own right, and she would do concerts around the area. So we got to know each other, through that. Of course, it wasn't deep relationship stuff or anything, but we just knew who each other was, and we'd say hi to each other if we crossed streams and that type of stuff. Um, but she had actually gone through two consecutive church splits. Something was happening at one church and people were like, we're out of here. But then the church that was born out of that actually went through another split. And she was at a place where she just couldn't wrap her head around church, God, anything. So she actually came to our church to be healed, which is didn't really happen right away. But she came to our church. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to church here. You got to sing in the worship team with us, because she has a drop dead incredible voice. And she's like, yeah, if I can just take a few moments to just heal and just sit and just be with God in here. I'm like, yeah, anytime, anytime. But we actually called her in to be part of my wife's and my friendship group. And we said, hey, let's invite her over, and I didn't have any feelings about that. We had talked a little bit about her wanting to record another album, and she had some songs she was working on, and I was interested in helping her record that. But that was it. I mean, did I think she was beautiful? Yeah, I thought she was beautiful, but I didn't have any want, to go with her. It was just very much that type of relationship. And but it awoke something in me
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if I want to be leading worship anymore. My whole life I've always wanted to be a music producer. I wanted to be the guy in the studio, whether I'm recording my own music or whether I'm uh, producing other people's works, or helping them, find the right sound, or helping them find the right connection, all that kind of stuff in music. I thought that's where my head was for so long. And it reawakened that drive in me, and it scared my wife.
Yeah.
Because remember, she had the dream of going around and being this great worship ministry. And then what's it going to be like if you go out and you try and follow this dream that you've had for so long? That's not going to happen, right? And so, and she saw the writing on the wall after my now wife came into the picture. She started praying really hard for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know exactly what her prayers were about, but she said, "No, God, help, protect him, protect him." But in my own world, I felt I was too far gone. Well, she was helping me with my album. This other woman was helping me with my album, and we got to talking a lot, and we just kept saying to each other, "Yeah, I'm just tired of so many meetings at church and having to
Yeah.
do this and having to do this." And we had really amped up a lot of meetings because of some things that we felt God was doing. And so we'd have weekends all taken up, and it would just be just so exhausting. And it was always like, Maurice, you going to be there? Maurice, you going to be there? Yeah, I'm going to be there. I got it all covered. Got all the band together. Everything's fine. And it was just on and on and on. And I remember coming down after we were having some ministry time, just laying on this, the special speaker that we had talking to us was preaching about the Father's heart of God. And I came down and he came over to me and I was just on the floor. I just needed something from God at that moment. And he came over and he started talking to me and praying over me. And I just crawled up almost in his lap. And I just was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And that was also becoming very scary to my wife, that I would leave that position to just go do
Yeah.
something else,
Mhm.
whether it was music or not. I didn't care anymore. And but the more that I talked with this other woman about what I thought church should look like, and how it was, what was it like back in the days of Acts, and how did God commission? How did Jesus commission disciples? And we're supposed to love each other. We're supposed to do life together with people. We're supposed to draw them in our communities. And I'm just sick of going to church where it's just all about the show and it's all about the programs, you know. And she was coming back with the same stuff. And I just felt drawn to that. Like, somebody hears my heart.
Mhm.
And she was like, wow, somebody hears my heart, you know, because she had been yelling that at the top of her lungs for a while.
Yeah.
And so we just began spending more and more time together. And that one time happened where we went from uh, physical to, or emotional to physical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it's almost like, you have one broken person and another broken person, and now you're coming together and bonding over the traumas and the situations that you have. And
Exactly.
so how did that door open to say, okay, we're going to go from emotional to physical? Like, how was that transition?
Yeah, it wasn't immediate, but
Mm-hmm.
um, just it was little by little. We kept calling each other and getting a little bit more into each other's space. And when we'd see each other, we'd end up doing this one thing where she would hand me something and my fingers would touch hers, and then she'd look at me with these longing eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That type of stuff was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually she did become part of the worship team,
Mm,
and it was really powerful for a while. But then then I found myself, driving home uh, from work and stopping by where she worked and
mhm.
say, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on?" And stuff like that. And we'd have these real kind of emotional sessions together. And then one day I drove over to her house after I was out coming. I don't even know what I was coming home from, but I drove over her house, and that day it was the day. We started kissing, uh,
Yeah.
and then one thing led to another, and we engaged sexually with each
Yeah.
other. So
Wow.
it wasn't one of those things that just like a jack in the box. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
"Ooh, okay, I'm over here." It was
Yeah.
just longing and longing and longing.
Mhm.
And two people just wish, man, why can't I have that with what I have now? Right?
Yeah.
That's the wrong question to ask, but
Mhm.
it's the normal question to ask. Why
Mhm.
can't I have what I'm feeling with this woman right now with my wife?
Mhm.
And so it was only about, like I said, about 6.5 months later when that happened.
Yeah.
And then after that, we both said, "Oh, we can't do this. You got to." She goes, "You got to go home. You got to fix your marriage. It's got to be right. Your child needs you." All this kind of stuff. I said, "I know,
Mhm.
I know, I know." And I went home and tried to do that. And so much water had gone under the bridge. To be quite honest with you, I couldn't pull my head back around. I just couldn't pull my head back around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was on 9/11, right? It was on 9/11 that it happened, that I was like, "Oh my gosh, I thought the rapture had happened."
Mm.
Right? And because when I was growing up, we were watching movies about planes flying out of the air because they were
Yeah.
because they had been taken away. Christian pilots were taken away in the rapture, and I'm like, "Oh no, this isn't happening." And I was freaking out. And I was living with the other woman, or now my now wife at the time, in her apartment, and and I was freaking out so bad. I'm like, I cannot believe I missed the rapture. I cannot believe I missed the rapture. And I started calling all these Christians that I knew, and nobody was answering their phone. And I was like, what? 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 But then they discovered it was terrorism and all that kind of stuff. And then I finally did get a hold of somebody, and I figured they had a pretty good relationship with Jesus. So I hung the phone up. And I went back home to try and work things out with my wife, but it was like the bond between myself and the other person was so strong.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't explain it. She couldn't explain it. And I'm not saying, oh, look what God did, because that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was in our own flesh that this happened. And eventually, a few years down the road, I got an email from my wife, and she goes, "All you have to do is go sign the paper.
Yeah,
It's done,
yeah.
and and we'll be finished." And so I
Mm-hmm.
did that, all just numb. I was just
Mm-hmm.
numb.
Yeah.
And then I, a year later, ended up getting married. Just a real quick ceremony out by a tree
Mm-hmm.
along the river
Mm-hmm.
where we lived, and and I had to now maneuver something brand new in my life. I
Yeah.
had a family over there because when I tried to go back and make the relationship work, we actually conceived another child, and I actually walked out on a 7 month pregnant woman
Wow.
saying, I just can't do it anymore. And here's how
Wow.
deceived I was. I was writing a letter to her saying goodbye. And I said, maybe God is making things right.
Mm.
Maybe God is taking what you and I did that was probably wrong and we probably shouldn't have had happen. And he's righting the wrongs of our past. That's how
Mm-hmm.
deceived I was.
Yeah.
And even though I had an incredible feeling with this other person, my job was to commit to my wife.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we make no bones about it. And we've had people come up to us over the time that we've been married, and they've had really difficult marriages, and they've come to us almost for permission. Like, what do you think? Could I have a relationship as good as yours if I could just
Mm.
leave this man
Yeah.
or this woman?
Mm-hmm.
And both of us are like flat out no.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't make it work, that's on you guys, and you come to that decision. But you're not going to find permission here from us
Yeah.
for you to
Yeah.
leave the marriage just because we have
Yeah.
something, because you're going to have 20 years of hell in front of you to try and get to the happiness that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you said that because what your situation was, it wasn't permission from God.
Mm-mm.
You both were in a fallen place where you had, fallen from that grace, and God was still giving you a little bit of grace during that process, but it didn't relieve you of the consequences of, the coming together,
Right.
right? And
Right.
and I can only imagine, what your wife was experiencing during that time. Like, how did she find out what happened?
Yeah. Well, she found out because of a phone call, and um, I first admitted to the fact that I was doing stuff with her. But when I came back to try and make it work, she thought everything was going to be, at least on the up and up, that we would be back together. We would do what we could to make this marriage work,
Mm-hmm.
and everything would get back to the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
But she was hurting.
Mm-hmm.
She was hurting. And I've apologized to her profusely throughout my life
Mm-hmm.
of anything that comes up in my head going, oh man, I did that to her. And
Yeah.
I'll text her or call her and just say, I've just learned something and I need to let you know I'm sorry
Yeah.
about this. And she's given me grace to do that.
Mm-hmm.
She's come back, hey, you're forgiven. And I know, but I need this. I need to make amends with you. And when something comes up that I know I deliberately did against you,
Mm-hmm.
that I need to do that. But she was hurting so bad. And we
Yeah.
were at marriage counseling, and I saw the tears in her eyes, and she goes on, I don't want to be a single mom.
Hey, y'all, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Now, friends, if this conversation blessed you, do me a favor. Take a moment to leave a review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, because you already know we need more faith-filled, real conversations like this in the world. And listen, I know you heard a gem today, something that made you pause, something that made you think, something that made you say, woo, this was for me. But friend, it might not be just for you. So go ahead and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Send it to a friend, a spouse, a sister in Christ, somebody who's been feeling stuck or silent in this area. Let's spread healing, freedom, and truth one conversation at a time. And until next time, we're going to get candid, but keep it God. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.